It's the True Penny Show
with your host, James True Penny.
Hello and welcome to the True Penny Show. My name's James True Penny. This is my show, and today we are looking at the life and times of the late, great Dory Funk Jr. Man who has had quite the impression on the professional wrestling industry, and sadly passed away on August 4th at the age of 85, only a year after his final match. This is a man who literally wrestled for 60 years. And to join me on this epic journey, as always, is Mr. Marcus Green. How are you doing, sir?
Good, always excited to have these kind of talks. Obviously, Bill Possum is one of the, like you said, we lost Mr. Funk recently, but he left an incredible legacy in a lot of videos that catch up on some of that legacy, which we go through some of today. But yeah, somebody that's been wrestling that long, that has that much of a legacy, and really set a lot of groundwork for a lot of stuff that we get today. No matter how evolved it is, it's always good to pay our respects in more ways than one.
Absolutely. If you're not familiar with the Life and Times format, we more or less pick a match from every year of a wrestler's career that we can find. And when you've got a guy who's wrestled for 60 years, that's going to mean a couple of at least episodes to get the whole thing covered and respected. Now, we are not going to give you a blow-for-blow detailed historical account of Dory Funk Jr.'s career. That's not our place. Our place is to give you an impression of what he was and what he was to the wrestling industry. And the reason why we do it like this is because we usually take myself, who's familiar with somebody's work, and someone like Marcus, who's exceptional knowledge on professional wrestling, but not necessarily with that wrestler. So you get a look from the perspective of someone who's enjoyed his work for a long period of time compared to someone who's watching his work for the very first time. And Dory Funk Jr. Originally came from West Texas, from Amarillo, Texas, the son of former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Dory Funk Sr. He attended high school in Amarillo, and he went to where did he go to? He went to Costa High School, where he would be the amateur wrestling coach once he finished university. He went to university at West Texas State and was one of the incredible number of pro wrestlers that come out of West Texas State. Obviously Dory, not only Dory, but also Terry Funk, also Tito Santana, also John Bradshaw Layfield, also Bruiser Brody, Stan Hansen, and a plethora of others. Ted DiBiase as well, that came out of that incredible football program, which did more for pro wrestling than it did for pro football, I'll be honest with you. And he began his career in Amarillo, working for his father's promotion. On his first match was with Jerry Logan, and he was accompanied to the ring by Don Fargo. Sorry, his first match was with Don Fargo, but he was accompanied to the ring by Jerry Logan, who was on the West Texas State football team. And the entire Tecose High School amateur wrestling team came down to support him as well, because he was their coach. He won his first match, unsurprisingly, in his dad's promotion. But it set him off on this incredible career. He ends up working throughout Western States, Texas, which is his father's promotion. He moves on to Florida, and works in Eddie Graham's promotion in Tampa, works the southern promotions of the NWA in general. And by 1969, in a 6-year period, he is respected well enough to get a shot at Gene Kiniski and the World Heavyweight Championship, which is where we're going to start our visual journey. But Marcus, in an era of pro wrestlers that were the real deal, shall we say, and also had to have an incredible eye on self-promotion, 6 years is an awfully short time to go from being a flat-out rookie to being heavyweight champion of the world, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think that homegrown roots play a part, because everybody you just mentioned is, like you said, and I think you've mentioned this in previous shows that we talked about, some of those individuals here and there, that particular football program produced more pro wrestlers, like you said, than NFL stars. but all those guys are also people I would never want to get into a bar fight with.
Oh no, no,
I was
no, absolutely
that's
not. No.
that's they tough enough in the ring. Like as soon as you mention JBL, all I can think about is like he really does have like one of the best clotheslines ever. But
Yeah.
like all those guys you just mentioned, they're tough enough in the ring, let alone real life. Like in general. So I just think somebody like Dory, I think we're gonna go through it, but he has such a sound grasp on the fundamentals on top of you know great lineage and just I think just overall that Texas toughness. Um, it kind of allowed him to kind of really elevate through those ranks fast. Now, obviously, we got a completely different system today, and sometimes you can get through on name value, without name recognition, and sometimes it takes longer. But it is interesting because he was also, now as I say, we'll get off into it, very patient in the ring.
Yes. Yeah. It's having that confidence to tell your story at your pace,
Yeah,
which I would say it was a lost art, but I watched a wrestling match today that says it's not. We'll talk about that later on at the end of the show. But his ability to let things settle, to not do things, and to do things in a certain way is really what kind of stands him apart of the people of his era.
yeah,
The first match we're going to talk about is the World's Heavyweight Championship match against Gene Kaczynski. Kaninsky, not Kaczynski. So a different guy. But Gene Kaninsky was an exceptional professional wrestler, been World Heavyweight Champion for quite some time, Canadian. We're down in Florida. Kaninsky was kind of the ultimate heel champion of that particular era. And Dory Funk Jr. is going in as a popular young babyface. And if we got this particular video from the WWE Vault, because obviously they have access to the Florida library, thanks to the Graham family, and Dory is, you look at it and it's wrestling of its time, but equally it's not slow. It's best of 3 falls. They're going to be there for a while because that was the standard format of the day. They're going to have long periods of working holds, and then there's going to be some uptick towards the end of each fall. But it's kind of like you've got to have patience in those situations. There were some cards in those days where there may be only 4 matches on the card, but the card had to be 3 hours, so you're going to wrestle for 45 minutes, and that ability to keep an audience in the palm of your hand for extended periods of time because you weren't taking big bumps and because you weren't doing wild brawls all the time. You were doing things in a different format. Things were, if you were NWA Heavyweight Champion of the World, you had to wrestle and wrestle really, really well as being a genuine tough guy because you were the Heavyweight Champion of the World and you had to defend the NWA. And all the people we're going to talk about today up until this point were genuine tough guys. It wasn't until Ric Flair came along in the late 70s, who was tough, but he was not a genuine tough guy in the same way that Dory Funk Jr. or Terry Funk or Harley Race was. So, you have, there's a set of restrictions on this particular World's Heavyweight Championship match that you have to understand in the legacy of where we are in professional wrestling at the time. And you're right, that patience, the ability to not do things and still make it interesting is really the crux of the matter, isn't it?
yeah. Kind of almost reminded me of why appreciate the UWF matches
Yeah,
so much because it really is chess, not checkers, particularly with the bodies because a lot of this was really just a pair of boots and your tights, and the rest of it was pure grit. It
yeah,
wasn't so much flash and pants and this all that theatrics and all that. You really just this is the bare bones of the art form that we love and like you said, very much a product of its time. Was so much kind of like in they would call it the good old days when the curtain wasn't pulled back. Um,
yeah,
so far it's not even visible no more. Like it really, people really came to see uh the art form for what it is at the ground grassroots of it all. Like I said, the finishing maneuver of this match is a spinning toe hold.
Yeah.
That would damn near be sacrilege in today's you know time. A lot of fans, if some of them even recognized the maneuver or knew what it was at all. So it's it really is cool to just see, like you said, that genuine tough guys doing this for the love of the game at the basics. At a time when it really was like a real spectacle to watch. And like you said, a completely different day and time because when you were champion, you were expected. Like I think after the match, because he said he would have to wrestle how many matches across how many towns and states and countries.
Yeah.
Like that was a
Yeah.
completely different, thing. You had to be a different type of person. Even like you said, mentioning Flair, that schedule back then was insane.
Yeah.
But it was the expectation,
Yeah.
So it was just
Y-
different breed.
Yeah. You are the best. Your job is to then represent us everywhere. Now, what's interesting actually about this short film is there's an interview with Dory at the end of the match with Gene Kaninsky. There's an interview with Dory, um, and I found it really interesting because obviously we're used to promos now being, fairly bombastic and bombacious, and there is room for the quiet promo. Chelsea Green this week had a quiet promo that had quite an effect on WWE television. Um, there is room and space for a quiet promo occasionally. But here's Dory, and he sat down with Gordon Soley, the Dean, the man himself, arguably the greatest commentator of all time, and he just comes across as normal. Just a nice guy, normal, like, oh well, this is I'm gonna have to set myself apart. And he said, uh, you know, uh, what, how do you think your career is going to go? And he's like, well, I don't think I've really reached my peak until I'm 30 years old. And he presents himself so well. Like, he's a school teacher, he's a college educated man, he's clearly intelligent and clearly has a sense of gravitas about himself, which would play to a Southern conservative audience in an exceptional way. He knows that, and he sat there with a shirt and tie and his cowboy hat, and he looks every inch what Dory Funk Jr. should look. When you see a picture of Dory Funk Jr. in his civvies, that's what he should look like. But it just struck me as like, this is of its time, but it's also timeless. Like, you could, it's the kind of presence you can't buy, just because he understands his audience, he understands what he's trying to get across, and it's a sense of everyone else. We look at this disc, and you look at, like, you've got people like Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik, and all of these outlandish characters that you are in professional wrestling. But I'm the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. That means something. That's important, and here's why: because I'm a reasonable, well-spoken, intelligent human being that's going to present professional wrestling the best way I can. And I think that was really important to his aura as a pro wrestler.
Yeah, and when and hearing you talk, it kind of like it makes me appreciate, like, speaking of that Chelsea Green promo, why it was so important for Nick Aldis to do what he did while he was NWA champion, kind of try to take it back to some of those
Yeah,
cues, even during a time where everything has to be so dialed up to 10 and bombastic. He would try to dial it back and just get back to basics, of just looking like a real professional, both in and out of the ring. Um, Not doing too much, just talking like a regular human, somebody that's coherent. And another element to, like you said, this particular piece, Mr. Soley is putting him over the whole time.
yeah,
It's not just on him. It's not Mr. Soley trying to get himself over, be his own standout on the show. He's doing exactly what he's supposed to do, and that's
yeah,
highlight the talent. So
yeah,
it's so many things that a lot of folks today, I would imagine, is born to them, but when you do the comparison and contrast in your head, it really is just peeling back all the unnecessary stuff and getting, like I said, down to the bare bones. What just works, with
yeah,
all the It's all the extras. It's a lot of extras on it. And I get it. We in completely different times, but stuff like this, really takes it back. The really, like I said, the heart of the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Next on our playlist is one of the first defenses of that championship. We're in Tokyo. We're at the Japan Wrestling Alliance, or Japan Pro Wrestling Association, or Japan Wrestling Association, universally known as JWA. The name changed depending on the era. JWA was the precursor to both All Japan Pro Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling, and it was originally founded by Ricky Dozan to be in NWA territory in the late 1950s. He have found two young stars in Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba, who we will be talking a lot about, as you can probably imagine, given the era. And they became the cornerstone young draws of the promotion. When Ricky Dozan passed away in the early 1960s, it was Giant Baba, Antonio Inoki who pushed the company forward. The company would not last very much long after this. Funnily enough, because of a scandal involving Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba, who were trying to take over the promotion. It's never been really completely clear, but generally speaking, that they weren't happy with how the promotion was being run and decided they could do a better job. And were trying to figure out how they were going to go about it. It was discovered, and therefore somebody had to take the fall, and Antonio Inoki got fired, which led to the development of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Not long after that, Giant Baba quit. So when you got your two biggest stars disappearing, the JWA did not last much longer. Giant Baba took the NWA affiliation with him. Antonio Inoki became affiliated with the WWF, and that's a whole different story. But for now, let's go back to 1969. Dory Funk Jr. is 2 years into his reign it's his first year, isn't it? His first year in his reign of NWA Championship. Giant Baba is pretty much at his prime as a pro wrestler, and it's kind of stark different presentation to what we see in Florida, but also exceptionally familiar. It's a wrestling ring. There's lots of people in suits. It's a much more well-to-do audience in Florida. Not knocking you guys in Florida, you're lovely. But in Florida, it's very much a working class sport. Whereas in Japan, it's a bit more middle class. The audience is a bit more reserved. This is the salaryman class. They are the working class of Japan, but they tend to be office workers. Things are a bit more reserved, as you can imagine. This is the reputation of Japanese wrestling fans being quiet comes from. Dory Funk Sr. is managing Dory Funk Jr. That's very important, because he's realistically portrayed as a heel. Not like, Abdullah the Butcher level of heel, but he's definitely a heel. And Dory Funk Sr. will do some heelish things as representation to his son in this match. 60 minutes, best of 3 falls, the old school NWA rules. That was the job. That's what you had to do night in, night out. And no matter where you were in the world, you were defending the NWA Heavyweight Championship against the top draws of the time. And that didn't come much bigger than Giant Baba in 1969. This match is not what a modern audience would necessarily catch on with, because it is exceptionally slow. And there's nothing wrong with that. It kind of has to be, because, an hour is a long time. And we've seen hour-long matches recently. And you have to pace them correctly, and you still have to make them entertaining. But Dory Funk Jr. is such a draw on his reputation alone as NWA World Heavyweight Champion. That's fine. And like you said earlier, patience is everything. What's your thoughts on this match, Marcus? Because it's markedly different from anything else we tend to associate with Japanese wrestling today, and certainly even different from what we saw in Florida.
Yeah, I thought it was, very much like me. We're gonna get to the next one, but I thought, two of his best opponents were Mr. Bob and Mr. Inoki, just because it was a contrast in styles. Was up until this point, was this his first time in Japan, Mr. Punk?
It was one of his earlier trips. Dory began going to Japan in around about this time. He would become a regular in All Japan Pro Wrestling and essentially help build that promotion. So yeah, this was not his first trip, but certainly one of his earliest trips. I found out exactly when his first match was, and I was like, "We'll go look at cage match while you have a talk, sir."
Yeah, because it was interesting. Because obviously John Bomber very much lives up to his name, so I would imagine that might have been an expectation for him to kind of just do the big man stuff. But he really, like you said, with the time limit, you really have to pace yourself anyway, and that's just something that Mr. Funk always did. It's a lot of it is body chest, and then with a finisher like the spinning toe hold, you really have to pick your spots. He was great at that, but somebody like Mr. Barber really got in there with him. It's like, okay, you wanna do this limb exchange? We can go there. So you gonna go for my arms, I'm gonna go for your leg, and so on and so forth. And it really just became a long war of attrition. Not too dissimilar to what he's gonna have to do with the legend in the next match, but this was a real good showcase because I think kind of made Mr. Funk have to adapt on the fly. You see them kind of taking breaks here and there, kind of really assessing each other. Always, like I said, being managed by a father who really had a different idea what he should stay doing instead of maybe pacing things out. So, uh, like I said, as he was working as the heel for his son, who may have been more reasonable to do things in straight up and down way as opposed to kind of clear things out. So, yeah, it was just like you said, it was long, it was arduous, but it was effective, and it's kind of what it was. Today, like I said, this would kind of almost really be sacrilege to what modern day fans have been very much programmed to view as quality wrestling on a consistent basis. But this is like I said, this is the basics that everything we see today was built off on. So, obviously, maybe the match is not as long, depending on what you're watching. Maybe more so in Japan and AEW these days. But
Yeah,
yeah, this is what it was. This is how I was executing, like you said, in front of that audience. Very much appreciated. Like you said, the working class in Japan. Just, I'm glad that you kind of laid out where everything kind of started from with the reputation that would eventually come with Japan, with just like the more respectable silence that's associated with that part of the world. So yeah, it's just good stuff. But this type of stuff here is yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, because you probably expect Mr. Babel to play big, and he did, but he really got in the trenches with somebody like Dory, which most people
mm,
by going down his list. I mean, they tried to get in there with him, but he had such a command, like I said, with his patience and his ability to pick spots and really working towards certain limbs, certain moves, and even when he didn't do the the spinning toe hold, he had other things to go to. But if you
yeah.
let him get out the gate on you too early, I don't know if he really ever caught up. So
That's the thing. It's like, yeah, um, you're playing checkers, he's playing interdimensional physics. Um,
yeah,
he's like, and it's the little stuff too. Just like he's heel. He's still NWA heavyweight champion. He can't afford to be like a full on like interference led heel, but it's like we're just watching a clip here whilst you were talking. He's got a short arm scissors on Baba, and he's grinding his arm into Baba's elbow just to make it look more horrible. Because he's an oppressive wrestler, right? He's after grinding away at you for an hour. He doesn't have to. That's part of the character, but the advantage of being the champion's advantage, right? I don't have to win this match, and I can go 60 minutes. Can you? Can you really put way two falls on me in 60 minutes? And that's the challenge. The challenge to be NWA World Heavyweight Champion was um, it was a more arduous task in 1969 than it was in, say, 1986. And I'm not knocking Flair and Ronnie Garvin and those guys who were NWA heavyweight champion of the world, but they were playing to a different audience. These people had come to see a wrestling match, and they wanted to see skill, and they wanted to see, a certain level of engagement in professional wrestling that um, you weren't seeing in the other matches on the card because they were preliminary matches for a reason. It's still kind of delivered as a sport. That's the interesting thing about it. Now, there's still room for people like the Sheik and the people like Abdullah. They weren't against that stuff. But you were NWA heavyweight champion of the world. There were things you had to do. That was part of the thing, right? and even you look previous eras, people like Wild Bill Curry, who was someone Dory wrestled on a regular basis in Texas, was a massive draw because he was a brawler and a shooter, and he was the NWA Brass Knuckles Championship was developed for him because you couldn't put the big singles championships on him because he wasn't representing the company well. There's one of the reasons why you end up with secondary championships is because you end up with draws who won't fit the mold. Dory Funk Jr. was the mold. And you look at the lineage of people like Gene Kiniski and Lou Thez and Ed Strangler Lewis, Dory's exactly in that threshold of where you are as a pro wrestler. He's calm, he's calculated, he's controlled. Cold killer, it was described him as his heel character. And you just watch him looking around the ring. It's just cool, calm confidence, just steadily picking his spot where we're going to go next. And that's what he exudes as NWA Heavyweight Champion. Shall we move on, sir?
Yes, sir.
So next up, we're going to flick to 1970. And we're still in JWA. And this time, he's wrestling Antonio Inoki, defending the NWA Heavyweight Championship on what would have been my birthday if I'd been born 4 years earlier. 2nd of August 1974. Yeah. Inoki's a different animal to Baba. He's a genuine natural athlete. He's also a mixed martial artist and takes very much a sporting approach to pro wrestling. Not that Baba doesn't, but Baba is more in the mold of a traditional North American style wrestler, whereas Inoki is kind of applying more catch wrestling to his presentation. So someone like Dory Funk has got to take a different kind of approach to a guy who's all energy and all skill level and an absolute technician. And unsurprisingly, this one goes for the hour. Dory and Giant Baba end up in a 2 falls to 1 victory, whereas Inoki manages to get Dory to go the full hour. And it's not slow, and it's still entertaining, and it still doesn't really slow down. This is the kind of match that built the reputation for Inoki to be able for him to find his own wrestling promotion because of the quality of these matches that he had with Dory Funk Jr. The draw he became as a pro wrestler in this era was absolutely vital to the development of professional wrestling in Japan in general. New Japan Pro Wrestling would not exist without this match. I would almost guarantee that, because of the way, and matches like this, not just this one, but like the overall aura that Inoki developed against the best wrestlers in the NWA is really important to the growth of New Japan Pro Wrestling. What do you think of this one, Marcus? Because this one's you've really got to dig in with this one.
Yeah, I just thought it was an all timer. Like, this is the best of the best right here. This is what you want to see. This is what they, uh, why it's so interesting when you get like like actual Olympians, of real early successful amateurs that get into the actual business of it all, because they have a great foundation to get in situations like this and really thrive. Now, it's always interesting when they have to put more of the entertainment onto stuff like this, because, like I said, the audience is really no longer specifically statewide necessarily geared towards this type of stuff, because everything has to be interactive and pop a player and all this stuff. But this was a perfect example of a true war of attrition between two warriors with maybe varied styles, but very similar grit and really ideas. When you look at kind of the early onset, they had a lot of similar ideas that kind of clashed on each other. But yeah, these two like an instant like ring rivals to me.
Mm.
So I just great, like you said, just kind of laid the foundation. Like, even here, you see just how good Inoki is. Like I said, Mr. Funk is just so patient, and he picks his spots. And another thing about like just the bare bones of it all, just having boots and tights. Obviously you want to protect your limbs and whatnot, which is what the knee and elbow pads for. But they also expose even more effective weapon.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Punk was so effective as well. So, you just got it. It's probably the best showcasing of it here because he had an opponent that pushed him to that point. And by the time you get to the match, the end of the match, you can't even really be mad at the end result because this is kind of what happens when you get two guys at the top of their game. Can't
Yeah,
fight forever, but it feels like they could.
yeah, this is it. These guys had mad cardio.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
it's
this. I'm gonna say it is before the days of like trainers and eating right and diet and all the things that WWE pay several people lots of money to make sure that their wrestlers eat right and get
yeah,
decent food and good night's sleep and trainers are advising them about all of these things, and these guys probably did it on you know half a case of Coors and a couple of packs of cigarettes and away we go.
yeah. This is what this match in itself is what wrestlers mean when they say I'm in shape but not ring shape.
Yeah.
This is ring shape. Like I said, take on different definition today because you can hide being in ring shape by as you can say all the time talking about Brian Cage by getting your stuff in. Uh
Yes.
and kind of hitting your spots and going home early if you will, depending on how the match is set up. But here you can't run from that here.
Oh no.
So it's interesting just hearing that story, like you told the backstory between Bob and Inoki. If he doesn't get let go in that situation, we might not have New Japan, which
Yeah.
today would seem like it's inconceivable. But it's
Oh
so
yeah.
many little stories like that in wrestling where it's like if this didn't go this way, um, the industry might be completely different. So
Yeah, yeah. This is the thing. It's like you don't quite. There's so many things that's happened in Japanese wrestling because it's such a close shop compared to you know Western wrestling in the sense of how many of those shoot videos in the 2000s have we seen?
yeah,
So and so did this, and this, and this, and we've read the books and we've read the background story, whereas a lot of the Japanese stuff's not come out yet, and some of it will never come out because people have
yeah,
died.
yeah,
And yeah, it's that just this it's just the way it is. I don't think we'll ever find out the absolute truth about what happened to Inoki and Baba and JWA, but the end result was they both end up with the two dominant professional wrestling promotions in the country, and develop two distinct styles of professional wrestling in their own image. Of which Dory Funk Jr. was a major architect when it came to the All Japan Pro Wrestling. Would you like to move on to a next match, sir?
yes,
Or
sir.
is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, that was all.
So we're going to skip forward because I couldn't find any videos from 1971, 1972, and 1973. Just because I couldn't. We try and keep it on YouTube so it's accessible. By the way, if you really like the Antonio Inoki match, our good friend David Bixenspan of this parish, um, he did a much better version of the cut that's on YouTube on his Daily Motion channel. You can find it. I'll try and stick it in the links, because the Inoki match is great, but it's a bit murky. But we're gonna move on to an all-time rivalry, and we're back in Championship Wrestling from Florida. We're back with Gordon Soley. This is a short little snippet of the other side. This is 1973, and at this particular point, Jack and Jerry Briscoe have taken over Championship Wrestling from Florida. They're the chief bookers, not the Grahams anymore. And they are in a feud with Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk, arguably the two greatest brother tag teams of their era. And it's just a little snippet. It's just a little 2-minute video, but I thought it was worth watching to show the other side of Dory when you're having to work an angle and you're having to do things a bit differently because they were heels in Florida at the time. Terry was the wild man. Dory was the killer. The Briscoes were hot fan favorites because of Jack being former NWA heavyweight champion, or about to become NWA heavyweight champion at this point. Jerry, his brother, you have four gifted amateur wrestlers and four people who understand the wrestling business probably better than anyone else. They probably have the best wrestling IQ of any four wrestlers on earth at this particular point. And you're in Florida. And the Funks are hated. And the Briscoes are loved. And it writes itself, doesn't it, Marcus?
Yeah, the only person that's losing is the ref because it's Bedlam. That's basically what it is. It's Bedlam. I mean, he's there for. It's like he's only there for aesthetics. Um,
Yeah.
he's telling people what to do and trying to get order, but it's the chaos is the order of the match, right? So it's like you said, you got one team that's hated, one team that's loved. Individuals that really don't want to not have their hands on each other, so they're not really adhering to any tag rules because it really basically just should be tornado anyway. Um, but yeah, that's just like you said, that's just what it was at the time, and also seeing uh, just a tag team instead of having fun, having him with his brother at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, with his brother at that point, and obviously, like you said, it's and we haven't had necessarily a long, not too long of like family on family like that, where it's really like the intensity level is dialed up to 10. So it's a rare thing. Like you said, very short, but it paints enough of a picture to know that they were doing that for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think the thing is, as well, is like, I think Dusty Rhodes put it best. So, can you describe the difference between Terry and Dory? He said, one night I wrestled Dory for the NWA Heavyweight Championship of the World. We went an hour. Standing ovation from everybody. Next night I wrestled Terry Funk and there was a riot within 12 minutes. And that's it. That's Dory, cool, calm, calculate, killer. Terry was the wild man. You put them together, they were magic. So it's well worth watching for that little snippet. We have got more Dory and Terry stuff to look later on. But right now, we have to go back to one more NWA Heavyweight Championship match. I believe the last one, I think, on this one. But Dory may have lost the title at this point. I'm trying to work out the maths of the situation. But we're back in Japan. This time we're in All Japan Pro Wrestling. It's 1974. It's the 29th of August. And Dory is wrestling Jumbo Tsuruta. Jumbo is it's not an NWA Championship match because it's 1-4. Jumbo is the protege of Giant Baba. He's come through the JWA system and into the All Japan system. He jumped ship with Baba. And he had spent his excursion in West Texas, in Amarillo, with the Funk Brothers, learning how to be a professional wrestler from the American style. And as a result of that, you can see easily how much influence Dory has on All Japan Pro Wrestling and how much he has on Jumbo Tsuruta. And me and you, Marcus, have watched an awful lot of Jumbo Tsuruta matches in the last 12 months.
Indeed.
This is the earliest one we've seen. But you can see how much influence Dory has on Jumbo and how smooth Jumbo is. And also Jumbo, former Olympic wrestler, Dory, former amateur wrestler. There's so many parallels between the two. You can see why they gelled so well as teacher and student, can't you?
Yeah, yeah, and you can tell like that Jumbo's learning as he goes. He kind of have to because if like I say he was in control for most of the match, as you would expect. He's been to the dance and very skilled, like you said, by this point, been through wars with two absolute legends. So very much a learning opportunity for Jumbo at this point, and he did good. Like I said, but Noah was just on a different level, and but thankfully, Jumbo showed some real grit because kind of get lost in the way that door goes. You just will be behind the whole time. I think Jumbo did a good job in really trying to slow Dory down and try to work him and grind him the way he did him. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this was just a great exchange between yet another person who will become uh, a legend. It's interesting just how like many Dory kind of wrestled before they became who in their prime and like just some of the most notable performers in the industry. So, I think he had a great hand at molding them in terms of just hoping that reputation of being some of the best people in the ring. Because you face somebody like Dory, you really don't have a choice. Like you said, he's not going to be
Yeah.
like his dad, where he's trying to put you away early, um, by any means necessary. If not, just get this match thrown out in the first few few minutes because of that explosive temper that he had. But yeah,
Yeah. It's this one's again, it's much more closer to what a modern Japanese wrestling audience would be willing to accept as pro wrestling. But equally, it's still in that era of the quiet salaryman audience. Lots more women in the audience though, as you watch it. It's the middle of August. We're in Tokyo. I think it's the old Korakuen Hall, and so it's hot. It's these guys are gonna wrestle for half an hour, and it's intriguing to me the way that Jumbo, who at this point would still only be a young boy, he's still not like of graduated in that sense of to being like a main roster star. He Dory just gives him so much, he give like in this day and age, Jumbo is a young boy. He would not last half an hour with a former world champion. That's just not how it goes, is it? So getting this level, like the amount of faith they have in Jumbo, but equally the amount that Dory really relishes working with him. You can see that. I mean, Jumbo at this particular point, Jumbo started his career in 1973. He's 1 year in. This is a bit ridiculous, really, to be going at this level with a guy like Dory 1 year into your career. That's mad. And he doesn't look out of place. He doesn't look lost. He looks like he's got a commanding presence in the ring against this legend, who's only just lost the NWA Heavyweight Championship. Not exactly sure when Dory lost the NWA Heavyweight Championship. I probably should find out, really, shouldn't I? I'll do that now. In May 1973, so just over a year earlier than that, he'd lost the NWA Heavyweight Championship. And Jumbo's going toe for toe with this legend, and Dory's making him look like $1 million in the process just by not shutting him down when he could do anytime he wanted to. So the level of respect Dory has for these young guys and the level of respect for wrestling in Japan is absolutely fantastic as well.
yeah. And I'm just thinking about like what this looks like today. You have such a conflict of ideas because people want the scenario we kind of see here with the younger guys, but if they put them up against somebody in today's class of performers who's on the level of a Dory or whatever that looks like today, and they go too long, it's a problem. But
Yeah,
if you want to probably build up somebody, you have to put them to the test in a way that's conducive to a proper build. But because you know, like I said, the audience has been so conditioned, particularly like you said, on the west side of in the Western thing, like if this guy's on a certain level, they should get squashed, and I guess just compete with people on their level until they get to a level where they can face somebody like a door. But it's like, no, they need to be tested. Point, and so
yeah,
it's just interesting that that was the norm back then, as opposed to now. People that know exactly what it takes, but they just want to kind of like either book against it or just um, do this weird thing where they just stack people up with 50 losses. But it's
yeah.
like, but you saw them 50 times, so they matter. It just they don't matter when it counts.
I mean, that'll work, and that
Yeah,
can work, but it's the losses, it's the type of losses you have.
yeah,
If they were doing half-hour matches and just losing out, then that's fine. But losing in 10 minutes every time, and yeah, do they really matter that much? I mean, you're training them not to matter. That's the difference, isn't it? It's like this is the model equivalent. If you're looking at New Japan now, this is like the model equivalent of diking a guy wrestling El Desperado for half an hour and going 50-50 for half an hour. That's not going to happen. It's just not, because Daiko will get some offense in, yeah, but Despi is like, he's the star, he's the guy, right? He's the man. So That's the difference, isn't it? You can't, like, if you're looking at, I'm trying to think of a Western equivalent of, say, someone like Clark Connors. No, not Clark Connors, been going longer than that. But I'm trying to think. It was Billy Starks going against Athena.
Exactly.
That's one of the rare occasions where we saw that it actually works because Billy's incredibly talented,
Yeah.
and Athena is like also incredibly talented, and it doesn't hurt her if her protege goes 30 minutes with her. That's fine. Okay, but she couldn't do it with very other people because there's no story there to do it with, and there's no level of presence with the other person for her to do it with. So occasionally you can do it, but this is kind of like regular dough, sink or swim, right? Go wrestle Dory for half an hour in the main event, and if it don't work, bye. Try again in 6 months' time. This is your shot. So it's an incredibly high pressure environment for a company that's only a year old and is just starting. And you are the future of this company. You've been told so. So there's an awful lot of responsibility on Dory on Jumbo's shoulders in this particular instance. And Dory's doing his absolute level best to make sure this young man's a superstar. No, Jumbo's not going to win. That's not the point. It's going to last half an hour with a legend, and that's the point.
Yep.
And that's the way it needs to work. Is there anything else you'd like to say about this match, sir?
Oh, I mean, obviously, I think, like you said, you kind of we try to do our best to kind of release these once we drop the episode. Go check out this match as well as this one with Anoki and John Baba, because those also we talking. This is about Mr. Funk, but those three men are cornerstone of wrestling history and three reasons of why we do this whole thing in the first place. So
Absolutely. Next up, we have a bit of a change with the advertised programming. This one's from 1974. I've got a few from 1974. This is from the Open Championship League, Night 4. This is December 1975. So this was the precursor to the Championship Carnival, which would be the dominating tournament of the 1980s. And it's Baron von Raschke versus Dory Funk Jr. A very type of wrestler, a very different type of wrestling experience. For those of you who've not seen Baron von Raschke before, he was a heel, obviously, because he's called Baron von Raschke. He was German. He wasn't German. The character was German, with obvious kind of like comedy heel kind of traits of being, scary kind of German guy. And he was a mainstay of the AWA. Dory Funk Jr. at this point in All Japan Pro Wrestling is now babyface, full-on babyface. They love him and Terry. Like, they adore him and Terry for what they've done for All Japan Pro Wrestling. And the Baron isn't wrestling in his usual kind of heelish style because it's All Japan Pro Wrestling and he doesn't need to. He can just wrestle his match, which must have been a blessed relief just to have a wrestling match in this particular era. It's not as long because there was time limits because it was a tournament. This one went 14 minutes, and it's kind of more of a microcosm of what was going on for the foreigners in this particular period of time, because they were kind of bringing match quality that they needed to without the characterization so much. So this is not very much like what you would see Ron Raschke do in the AWA in the same time period. It's a much more clean, up and down wrestling job because he didn't have to do so much work, because cheating was still important then. When if you look at All Japan Pro Wrestling, they'd established everything to be kind of this above-board, realistic sport. So Baron von Raschke doesn't have to try so hard to cheat. He can just break the rules every once in a while, and therefore he's a bad one because of that. But there's some nice big power wrestling moves as well, like backdrop drivers and other wrestling moves that you wouldn't necessarily see in North America at this particular time. And kind of laying the foundation for that Kings Road style that would come along in the late 80s and early 90s. What do you think of this one, Marcus?
I thought it was another good opponent for him because Dory, he was like 6'3" and
Yeah,
whatnot, and his last opponents like if not of same experience, they had a nice size on them and whatnot, but I thought um probably Baron in terms of like weight and then just like you said, some of the moves that he would do were good. combatant. It was more methodical, slow, kind of cerebral precision in terms of attacking the limb. Like you said, the cheating, obviously with the name, you could kind of go expect it this time. Most of the people with those names are heels and very much work that way. But I thought this was another situation with a good contrast of styles because just the way that this the Funk wrestles, it almost comes off like it's cheating, but it's not because of the way he's doing it, grinding his forearm and elbow into like your space between your arm joints and whatnot. So it's I just thought Baron was a good opponent for him, not just for his size, but for his ability to use the dirty attackers, which kind of came off like I said, like a good contrast because once somebody's kind of putting their wrist and grinding them to your eyes, you kind of almost feel like that's illegal anyway.
Yeah, should be illegal. Damn it. Yeah, it's a really interesting kind of like study in contrast compared to like modern day wrestling, but equally, the match still has quality to it. There's pacing to it. There's timing to it. It's not a smash mouth kind of match. There's a little bits of niggle there, like Rashki's like elbowing in the back of the head as they come off the ropes and things like that. But that's all Rashki has to do to be a heel. He doesn't have to be like over the top with it, even though he's one of the most over top wrestling characters ever devised. So yeah. Anything else you'd like to say about this one?
Oh, that's it for me.
Now, we've got 3 on this playlist from that same tournament. So the next match is from the same like couple of weeks in that particular wrestling period, because it was an open tournament. I should find out who won that tournament. That'd be a good idea. Dory Funk Jr. versus Horst Hoffman. Horst Hoffman was an Austrian wrestler who wrestled mostly in Germany. Sorry, he's a German professional wrestler, but he mostly in Europe and worked in Japan for IWE and then for All Japan Pro Wrestling. He worked for the American Wrestling Association as well. And he was a former European heavyweight champion for All Star in the UK. So had quite a varied career. And he had a 20-year span from 1957 to 1977. He was actually Czechoslovakian. Still alive, he's 90 years old. Because of course he is. And he's a much more kind of straight-laced European professional wrestler going up against Dory Funk Jr., which is kind of a classical clash in styles, and you would expect. But Dory's got a massive amount of European influence. Those forearm lifters, for instance, are straight out of a British ring. He uses them an awful lot. His mat wrestling experience is also very European style too. He's kind of on a level of a catch wrestler. And Hoffman is kind of that catch wrestler ilk as well. So this is a fascinating watch in a differentiation of styles and how much of Dory Funk translates to a different wrestling audience around the world. I will find out who won this tournament whilst you talk about that one, Marcus.
Yeah, I thought it was a good, much, you obviously saw contrast, but it did feel a lot similar at times because both men favor, cravats and stuff, particularly Dory, who just maintaining that through transitions is great again, playing, body, chess, and not checkers. And then
Yeah.
Hoffman kind of returning fire in similar ways. Like you said, very much of that head scan style, that would very much become popularized. So again, not the modern audience would probably find this recently born, but this is just testing a man's will at this point. So it's both guys are clearly tough, you know, Austrian, are not for the faint of heart, tough guys in nature. So very much got that here. Great hip toss, great, like I said, or really focusing on that head, keeping that cravat, focusing on that wrenching that neck and that, upper torso and whatnot. It's great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a 12-night tournament, and the 2 people on top were Giant Baba and Dory Funk Jr. Yeah, funnily enough. So it was really important for wrestlers in this particular time period, and you look at who's on this card: Rushi Kimura and Dick Murdoch, Hiro Matsuda, who trained Hulk Hogan, Ken Mantell, who was booker for World Class a couple of years later, Dory Funk Jr. and Jumbo Tsuruta was on the last night, Giant Baba and Horst Hoffman was on the last night, and Abdullah the Butcher and the Destroyer, a classic age All Japan Pro Wrestling feud that started around this time over the old All Japan US title. I'm just looking at ProWrestler.com to get the full results of it. He said, yeah, Giant Baba and trying to find the actual results. Where has it gone? Yeah, it must have been Giant Baba who won it because it doesn't say anywhere on this page. It still tells what happened. It was It was at the Ricky Dozon Memorial Show. Was the final night, but I'm guessing that Andre must have not Andre. Giant Baba must have won that particular particular tournament because of the way the winds blew out. But you look at, there was 4,800 at that show. There was 4,000 at the previous show. They didn't play into an audience of less than 2,700 people. There was 14,000 at the Budokan for the opening of that tournament. for the Ricky Dozan Memorial Show, and which is where the big memorial shows are still held to this day. So it was an incredibly hot period of time for Japanese wrestling, and Dory Funk Jr. was kind of key to that development, wasn't he?
You got cut out a minute there. You said Dory Funk was key to what?
I said Dory Funk was kind of key to that drawing power and that development of Japanese wrestling, specifically All Japan at the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just like you said, when you go down that list of names that was in that tournament, it's a bunch of guys that can wrestle long and hit hard.
Yeah,
Which is kind of really, like you said, the foundation for everything that we get today. And then, obviously, like I said, Mr. Funk played a key part in that. Somebody who wrestled the legendary Tony Onoki, who, was on a great fan and everything that came with it. And, just seeing these guys, because there's the expectation of not on the skill level, but that you were going to get a lengthy contest, not one filled with near falls to death, but one where it's like you're really gonna have to try and focus in and figure out who's gonna win because it's such an even and matched contest. So it's he just played such a huge role of influence while also being a big deal, which doesn't always happen. Like sometimes people can play a role, but then not necessarily get the accolades or the respect along the way for everything they do. People around them. I think about, in modern times today, a name like Bailey, who does a lot, has influenced a lot, and does even more outside the ring to help the next generation, but doesn't necessarily get that credit. Has the respect industry wide, but doesn't necessarily get the notability from a workplace, if you will, for everything that she brings to the table. In that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next match in this tournament was from the 17th of December. Don Leo Jonathan, a name we don't talk about much on this show, and we probably should talk more about. One of the great big men of all time, Don Leo Jonathan, was a giant. He had giantitis. An incredibly fit human being, a massive sports star. And again, it gives you another kind of development of Dory Funk Jr. Don Leo Jonathan is a massive guy, and he can go. He's like going toe for toe with Dory Funk throughout this match, and it shows you how great that Dory is because he's having to wrestle from underneath, which is not his natural position as the dominant technician. But this match is still absolutely enthralling, and certainly the fans are very much into this. What do you think of this one, Marcus?
This one I really just realized that I had the appreciation for the I had mentioned his height, which Mr. Soley pointed out in the first that classic WWE Vault episode that kicked off everything. But like you said, Mr. Funk was very usually dominating in his matches because of his technical style. But if he came off like a bully, it was because just how consistent he was with that style, how persistent he was. Not because he was
Mm.
facing guys that were littler than him, and particularly with this list of two. Once again, it's so well put together. I would hate to run into any of these guys in the hallway, in the bar, in the street. These are not small men. And, to something else you said, just about how these guys look. Back then with this style, these promotions, being a pretty boy did not serve you.
No,
Being a quote unquote body guy, you needed to have some meat on your bones and needed to be kind of stocky, without all the need for the 6 pack abs and this and the third. There was no need to be an Adonis because you was just trying to make sure that you were statuesque so you wouldn't fall apart. And somebody like Dory comes along and breaks every part of you down, and you come in there looking like maybe like a full statue, and then he uh leaves you looking like the Mona Lisa because you're missing your arms because he was grinding on it and then pulling it for 30 minutes plus. So yeah, somebody um now that you mentioned about Mr. Leo, is he? How many people did we see in wrestling that actually suffer from giantism? Because I know wasn't it Andre did it too, right?
Andre did, Giant Baba did, and Don Leo Jonathan did as well. Obviously, there are treatments for it. Obviously, Paul White is another one.
Yeah.
Don Leo Jonathan was born in 1931 and lived till 2018. So he had quite the life. He was doing the maths of that. Let me think about this. 69, 79, 77 years old when he passed away. 87 years old, get that right. He was Canadian. The Mormon Giant, Don Leo Jonathan, as he was called. And he
Yeah.
trained in Toronto National Wrestling Alliance and Maple Leaf Wrestling, one of the precursors of the current Maple Leaf Wrestling. Debuted in 1949 and retired in 1980, so he had an incredibly long career, and he was a Mormon, which is like a remarkable thing for a professional wrestler to be.
Yeah.
Possibly more remarkable than anything else. But yeah, he was. I'll just look at his stats. He was 6'6" and 304 between 285 and 340 pounds from Salt Lake City, Utah. That's where he's billed as.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely
Yeah,
astounding presence.
yeah, I was gonna say maybe I'm misremembering, even though because we also thoroughly talked about him, but wasn't Mr. San Martino also in that ilk of like big guys like that?
Yeah, Bruno was. I'll have to look it up. But Bruno was another level, and again, majorly important, like influenced by Canadian wrestling. Bruno was. Actually, Bruno was only 5'10" and 265, but he was tall for his time.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Like he was stocky. 255 pounds at 5'10" is a lot of weight to carry, but he was of that style as well, the same as Don Leo Jonathan to an extent. Dory Funk, he wasn't technically as minded as Dory Funk, but he was a shooter and he did understand self-defense in pro wrestling. So it's it's interesting the way the bodybuilds go for
Yeah.
different eras of pro wrestling. Like these guys are not Greek Adonises. You're right. You don't see 6-pack abs. You see pretty well-rounded, athletic human beings who need some padding because they're taking bumps on really stiff rings.
Yeah.
And they've got to do it for half an hour to an hour a night, every night. All Japan were doing like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off back in this period. Still are today, really. Most wrestling companies in Japan, the big ones like Noah, DDT, New Japan, and All Japan, with full-time rosters, they're doing 1 night, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So they'll do a 10-day tour. New Japan have obviously just finished the G1 Climax tour, and they finished that today. And they've got a 3-week rest period. But if you're an American, that's 3 weeks. Go back to the States, pick up 20 dates, and then come back to Japan. So it's a long life. Baba paid you well. It was one of the reasons why the Funk Brothers did so many All Japan tours was because Baba invested in people much more than any other promoter did. You would get your retainer at the beginning of the year, you get paid a set fee for the tours, and if you want to do all the tours, you get paid for all the tours. If you don't want to do all the tours, that's fine. If you're not here, you can't get pushed. So people did all the tours because there was a plan in place. So if you David Dynamite Kid talks about it in his book. So I think they did like 18 tours a year. You could do all the tours if you wanted to. They got back in 1984. They were on $10,000 a tour each and $10,000 a tour retainer. 10,000 retainer and $10,000 a tour. So that's $180,000, $200,000 a year just for wrestling in All Japan. Never mind anything else that you were doing. So the Funk Brothers, who were top of the card guys, who were beloved by that promotion, were on good money, and it was a good place to be. We are on to a classic Funk Brothers tag team match with a classic Funk Brothers opponent. Can't be said for anything else, really. This is wild. This is Terry and Dory Funk in the real World's Strongest Determination Tag League. And the final is against the original Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher. This is about as All Japan as it gets. This is about as classic as All Japan 1970s wrestling as it gets. There is a nice little video package of the entire tournament that gets you caught up before the match starts. And the match is wild. Because of course it's going to be. Because it's Abby and the Sheik against the Funk Brothers. What else could it be but just bedlam? What do you think of this one, Marcus?
Yeah, this was just another class almost the Titan a bit because wow, he really just clocked him. That had to be was that area that just clocked him. That was insane. Could have dropped him, but yeah, these Abdullah and the Sheik, and the Sheik has always just been associated with just madness overall. So I think these combinations were just insane, really. Like this was another scenario where it's like, how did they expect this to just go and not just devolve into pure chaos?
Yeah, that's kind of what they were looking for. They were hoping for pure chaos. And basically the story of the match is Abdullah and the Sheik have got a fork each, and they're going to try and take off Terry's arm one bit at a time. And it's a classic Terry Funk 1970s trope of injured babyface taking a beating, which he loves, and was a massive influence on him. It's an old Texas wrestling trope. You have a babyface so beat up they can't continue and they have to be helped in the back. One person has to carry on by themselves. It wasn't quite the same because obviously Terry was having to stay in the ring because it's All Japan Pro Wrestling. But Dory getting more and more wound up because he can't help his brother on the ring side is such an emotional draw in this match. And it's the antithesis of what we've seen in All Japan Pro Wrestling. But Abdullah and the Sheik are just such big stars and have such big presence. It just works so well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and maybe in some ways, somebody like we hear about Abdullah and the Sheik all the time, but I don't know how often they tag. Like I said, it does feel like a really great combination for pure violence, and of course, with just how he is, of course they'd be trying to take Terry's arm off because you probably feel like it's a receipt owed or something. Um, but just him playing that character because obviously he's playing off his brother who, like you said, cool, calm, collected killer, and he's a little bit more, a lot bit more elevated and animated in his mark, but also the knowing picking his spots much like his brother does in the ring, outside the ring, in terms of like you said, just playing that emotional and that emotional aspect to it because obviously Dory can go with anybody, um, however long he needs to, but even 2-on-1 situation is too much for even somebody that talented. So if he's playing that emotional component outside the ring, like you said, even then, just those storytelling beats just help with everything because at this point, Funks have built their reputation for who they are. There is no more
Yeah,
guessing. There is none of that. They are established, and all that's left to do is the execution. So
yeah. It's just genius. There's not a lot to this. There's no wrestling really. There's no like. This is not drop toe holds and side headlocks and hammer locks like you would expect from a Dory Funk match. This is pure emotion and violence of the highest order. But it shows you the how versatile Dory is and that style can be in the situation. Like this isn't. It goes back to the match with the Briscoes. Like that was about the Funks being killers, whereas the baby faces they're just as effective. They can do it all, it's absolutely staggering to watch and see
yeah,
in this particular context.
yeah, and like we always talk about on the show, tag team wrestling is an art form within an art form. So
Absolutely
you
is,
know,
yeah, definitely.
yeah, and even with that family aspect, it's just another layer. So yeah.
So we're going to move on to the next one, which is another house show match. It's 1978, and we're against Blackjack Lanza. And the reason why I picked this one, even though it's not the most interesting match in the world, but it shows you that depth again. Blackjack Lanza's main job would be as part of the booking crew in WWE in the 1980s. Obviously, with Blackjack Mulligan, who was a major part of the front office. He was a big star in the WWF at the particular time in the 1970s. So I just thought this was an interesting one because it is like the two quintessential Texas wrestlers wrestling in Japan. um, and Blackjack Lanza known for being a dark heel character, having a straight up wrestling match with Dory Funk Jr. is a thoroughly entertaining thing to watch. What did you think of this one, Marcus?
Same. I felt that. I felt that same way. I feel like if they, put this in a comic or something, Lord would be kind of like the almost like the anti-hero, and then Blackjack would be like you said, your classic villain type.
Yeah.
Uh, so it was it's really interesting to see. Also, this is I think my first time on the list looking at somebody. Maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. Somebody with actual knee pads. Uh, like I said, this is all grit and persistence. So yeah, this was interesting because he gave as good as he got, and obviously looking at the hair and then the sideburns, he was just like a really good foil in that way for Thor, both aesthetically and uh, on a physical level as well. 'Cause I don't think anybody to this point has taken it to Thor in the way of like straight hands to the throat and whatnot. Like Thor really had to kind of be careful with this guy because it was thinking like you said, this advent of being another Texas boy along with him in Japan, adapting a more aggressive style. Because if you don't, just in general, and we all know this, you're gonna get run over in Japan if you don't have a more uh, aggressive style about yourself. Because you can't wrestle soft, and they're gonna allow you to. And if you do, you're not gonna last a week there.
No,
You know,
no.
you're not gonna last a week. People literally go there to toughen up and garner far better reputations than they would even in the western side of things. So yeah, this was a good point. Again, not a small guy by any means. Actually, this is probably another time where much like but it either was Jumbo or Giant who he had the reach on him. He had the reach
Yeah.
advantage on him. So yeah, so that's something that was interesting watching him adapt to because normally by the time you get over on the ground, he's the one to control. But a lot of times it was Blackjack. So that made for an intriguing match. But like I said, I'm glad you put on here because why it wasn't like the biggest, like, oh, this is, the match that's gonna sell out the arena. It was an effective content.
Yeah, this is it. It's like he's not wrestling the big stars every night because you can't. Sometimes you got to wrestle Blackjack Lanza or in Fukuoka on a Tuesday because you have to. And I think those are the nights that are just as important. Seeing what he does with people who aren't. I'm not saying Blackjack Lanza's he was a star of his era, but you know what I mean. He's having matches with guys who you can see the development of the style and how things are working in this time era, and it's contrasting with matches against other people, which is kind of brings us nicely to our second to last match on this playlist, because Mil Mascaras was also a big star in All Japan Pro Wrestling, and he has a top line match with Dory Funk Jr. Now here's the thing: I was joking about this yesterday. Mil Mascaras would never job for anyone, and Dory Funk Jr., as a former NWA heavyweight champion, is not going to lose to Mil Mascaras. So I was intrigued as to how this was going to end. I'll be honest with you. Like,
Oh, not.
well, that does not work for me, brother. It's written all over this match. Because obviously Dory's a massive star in All Japan and probably would do business, but he's not going to do business to a guy smaller than him. Because, that's not the way it works. So I wondered how this was going to work out, and funnily enough, ends up being a double count out. What a surprise! But equally, it showed you again that versatility of Dory in this style, working against a lucha legend in Mil Mascaras, who has obviously got the antithesis of like the Texas styles in many respects, because Yave and like American style catch wrestling don't always mix necessarily. They come from different angles, literally, because Mexican wrestlers work from the right and American wrestlers work from the left. So it's literally the other side of. Doesn't It's one of the sometimes if you watch like a lucha guy versus a North American wrestler, and you go, sorry, an American wrestler or a Canadian wrestler, oh, this is going to be amazing, and then it doesn't work. It's partly just because they're doing two different things. One person's playing tennis and the other person's playing badminton. So it's kind of that kind of
Yeah,
thing. But here, everything clicks and everything works and everything is super smooth the way both of them intend it to be.
yeah, I seen that recently. It was earlier this year, uh, or sometime late last year. Anyway, it was Carmelo Hayes versus Dr. Wagner Jr. in the
Yeah.
Open Challenge. It did not click. It did not click, and like to your point, sometimes it's just not going to do that. Like a lot of times, when these performers, meet up with these luchadors, their style just isn't conducive, or they're just not, um, used to having to do those moves. In which case, you kind of have to have your opponent set up to do certain things, particularly using the ring to do so. So
Mm.
it was the timing was off, the communication felt like it was off, and it just wasn't clash of styles. And oftentimes, because fans don't have the correct perception of it, they'll put it on like the performer suck or something. That's just not it.
Mm.
Sometimes the dance partner isn't right. So
Yeah.
like you said, but here, and I think, well, this is his first time, on this list. I think genuinely dealing with a legit high flyer in that
Mm.
regard, anyway. Where
Yeah.
again, it much like with Blackjack, it presented him with a different challenge, which was great because the way that Mr. Funk wrestled, he very much took his time, got methodical, like I said, always kind of, taking a breather to see what he needed to do next versus what he was doing, which may have not been working. A lot of times he would go for that spinning toe hold, which was one of the most intriguing things to me because I'm like, as effective as it could be, like you're leaving a whole limb to be using against you as a weapon, because they could easily, as soon as you start spinning, they could just kick you off. So
Yeah.
him adapting that double underhook suplex, um, was the answer to that. But uh, yeah, that is hilarious that neither one of them wanted to lose. That is, we always hear about those stories later, but that's always
Yeah.
interesting because it's
Honest to God, Mil Mascaras. The last time I saw Mil Mascaras was on the Giant Baba Memorial Show 5 years ago. He was 85 and he didn't job. Like they had to help him to climb to the top rope, and he did a dive off the top rope into the ring. And it's like, oh my God, he won't jobbing. Absolutely not.
I mean, obviously, I would
On this
imagine.
plane to come to Japan to lose.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would imagine that that's something that gets built up in his own territory. But I mean, that I
Yeah.
guess that goes to show you how much respect he garnered because that don't always translate to when you go somewhere else. We've seen a lot of people have to humble themselves in New Japan thinking they were just gonna be able to come over there and run through people. But that shows a lot of respect that they gave him, but
Yeah.
also for Dory, like, yo, I'm not laying down either. So we just gonna, that's interesting.
Let's negotiate then. Let's because like, well, be blunt. Dory can screw you up, so you listen to Dory. I'm not suggesting Mill was soft, but obviously common sense
Yeah,
applies at a certain point. So there would be a negotiation between Baba, Dory, and Bill Mascaris, presumably with a couple of interpreters to get between English, Japanese, and Spanish. Funnily enough, Dory Funk Jr. used to have Japanese lessons on his website back in when I first started floating around the internet looking up wrestlers, and I looked up Dory Funk, and on his website they had beginning Japanese, so you could learn how to read Japanese on the Funk Brothers website because Dory and Terry were keen on people to learn Japanese to understand their professional wrestling better.
nice.
Yeah. Well, we started this playlist in Florida, and we're going to go back to Florida to 1979 for our last match. For a match between, well, a little segment between two Texas legends, Dusty Rhodes and Dory Funk Jr. Dory Funk Jr. back to being the cold-hearted killer heel, and Dusty Rhodes being the smooth-talking soul man that was such a massive draw in Florida in the 1980s. And this is a kind of classic tale of Dory just running in and battering Dusty with a chair. That's it. That's all you need. That went out on television, and then we get to the main event, and it's Dusty Rhodes versus Dory Funk Jr. And it's great. We only see a snippet of it. It doesn't last very long. It's about 3 minutes long. Dusty's got a broken arm from this chair attack, and Dory goes after the arm, and it's just glorious because it's actually Terry and Dusty, isn't it? It's a tag match. I think I can't see who's that. I can't remember actually who Dusty is tagging with. But yeah, it's Dory and Terry against Dusty Rhodes and another partner. It's a bit confusing because it's Dusty versus Dory Funk Jr. That was it. Someone came in to I couldn't see who it was to defend Dusty.
Yeah.
But it was Manny Fernandez. My apologies, Manny. Do apologize. Yeah, it's Dory versus Dusty Rhodes. And Manny Fernandez comes in to try and save Dusty before the match and keep Dory away from his arm. But then it's just the
Yeah.
cold-hearted killer that is Dory Funk picking away at Dusty Rhodes, who's trying to wrestle Dory with one arm. And you couldn't get a bigger contrast to the Age of All Japan stuff. But equally, it's just so well done, isn't it?
Yeah, and with his style, that just lends itself to being a natural heel anyway. So once you bring in the chair of it all, and Dusty just plays such a great everyman,
Yeah.
and with that look, and then like throwing the arm and whatnot, he just really just got all the right nuances and on top of the personality, right? So it really was like a little heavenly clash of a guy who this is all pure grit and grime and stuff, and Dustin, like I said, was just like for every man, which always work, and you put those two in the ring and great combustible stuff. You got the guy who can just wail and beat down and weigh you down, and then Dustin with the great comeback and the flip flop and flying and all that good stuff. It was just a fantastic contract.
Absolutely, and it's well worth a watch even for the short period of time it's there. Now we're going to call it a day on this particular selection of matches. We will be back when we get a chance to record again, possibly in a week's time. This one's going to take us a while, but we're going to thoroughly enjoy every moment of reliving Dory Funk's career. After this first 17-year stint we've looked at, what's your thoughts on Dory Funk Jr., Marcus?
Another cornerstone. Another cornerstone. Kicked off things talking about that list of that school that he graduated from, and just that class of performers that particular football program cultivated, made far better professional wrestlers than they did footballers, and Mr. Funk and his family just produced some real just tough guys who really made a name for themselves. I think when you talk about that Kingdom song by Cody Rhodes, we're talking about Preston has want to run royal family before the
Mm,
song kicks off. I think gotta throw the funks in there.
absolutely.
Absolutely. So it's just really cool going down memory lane, seeing all these goats before they become goats, if you will, and just like how much he came into contact with him and clashed and was making his own road, and it's an illustrious 60-year career, which is still insane to think about. Um, that he literally, practically went till the day he couldn't go anymore. So, you know, um,
Yeah,
it's a hell of a thing to accomplish in a business that we seen pack a lot of people up long before their time.
absolutely. And my final comment on what we've watched today is this morning. Do you mind if I spoil the G1 Climax final for you, Marcus? Because I'm not
No,
sure you
no,
would.
please wax poetic, please.
This morning, I watched Yuya Uemura wrestle Raihi Owa in the G1 Climax final in a match that didn't go outside the ring, that barely ran the ropes, and that Raihi Owa won with a headlock. It was a match that Dory Funk Jr. would have been proud to see, and it works still. for every for every side headlock that Owa has put on in the G1 Climax tournament, I've thought about Dory Funk and how it's just headlocks. Dory Funk headlock is a work of art in how he works his opponent, how he works the match, how he gets the best out of the audience with it. And Raihi Owa has taken that on board as his main offensive weapon. Yuya Uemura has won 3 matches in the last 6 months with a wrist lock. These two are taking Japanese wrestling back to the core elements of what Japanese wrestling can be. And it's Dory Funk Jr., and it's Jumbo Tsuruta, and it's Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki all over again. And it is an absolutely glorious thing to see because all of that foundation that those men put together that became Puroresu is now being relived through an entirely new generation who had Ryogoku Sumo Hall rocking and rolling with a wrist lock and a headlock. And I have never, ever seen anything like it. You have to go watch that match. And if you watch this playlist first, your appreciation for that match will go through the roof because you will understand what they were trying to do, the story they were trying to tell, and how great just wrestling is. How many people I've seen today on Twitter just saying, I love professional wrestling, because that match we saw this morning was just perfect. And here's the reason why. Where can we find you on
Yeah.
the internet, Marcus?
Oh yeah, for that was beautifully said. And I think it's something like really beautifully poetic. How many times we've talked about how New Japan really in the process of redefining itself, and it feels like they're doing that by getting back to the things that defined them in the first place.
Absolutely.
Uh, you
Definitely.
know, and then just to mention on the G1, I'm just glad that the G1 winner is New Japan, a New Japan person. It was obviously, Zack Sabre, he probably got his crown, but before that, as much as I love the guy, Takeshita, that was a very interesting decision that they made. And so I'm glad, that they're riding this ship with two guys who really, like you said, to get back to the fundamentals. So shout out to New Japan for sending everybody home happy. Uh, you know, again,
Hilariously so.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So having said that, congratulations to those fellas. You can find me on X, really cruel and all the stupidity that's going on in the States right now, with all the other sane individuals that's left on X at Paradox Kid, at PARADOXKID.
You can find me at Sheriff Lone Star on Twitter and on Blue Sky and on Mastodon. You can find me at Sheriff Lone Star TX on Instagram if you like listening to me play guitar. Some people do, which is a nice surprise. You can find the show also on Troopany Show you can find the show at Troopany Show on Blue Sky, Twitter, and on Instagram. We will be back next week. Thank you very much for listening today. If you're listening on Stitcher or SoundCloud or on iTunes, thank you very much for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and leave us a follow. That would be lovely. And you can comment as well. Helps the old algorithm, you know. Take care, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.